candidates come in, we will announce their presence. What we like to do in order to, and we'll go through the consent calendar when we get a third member, what we like to do is have the commission appointee before we go into closed session. But before we go there, let me just ask that Dr. Weissman, you have a public comment card, and for those who wish to speak from the public, you have to fill out a card. Public comment is for those items that are within the purview of the Budget and Finance Committee but are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on a specific item within the agenda, then you must fill out a card as to that item. And so we also have Steve Simon, 2 public comment cards. So if you could have the 2 public comment cards come up at this time, and then we will have the commission appointee, and then we will go into closed session and then come back and deal with the regular agenda. Okay? Okay. Thank you, Dion. And let me let the record reflect that Mr. Koretz is here. We have a quorum of this committee.
All right. Thank you very much. I always like to make things easy for you, so this is your budget. You've seen it before. I hope you look at it while I speak. I have additional copies for other people. You know, the way it's presented in other places, Greg, it's not so easy to look at. On the back of it, the incomes, on the front of it, big problems with our cash flow. This is data taken directly from the Controller's office. As I come before you, I want to, first of all, set a series of principles that are not mine, but are in the various documents of the city as to the priorities for ways in which we can balance our budget this year and meet the challenges of the structural deficit that faces us next year. One of the things that I spoke before City Council on Friday on is the other document that I have also given you additional copies on. It seems to me that our leaders, you're among them, should show their responsibility and sacrifice to agree with the mayor that we all have shared responsibility and sacrifice, and I'm asking for a 25% reduction in your salaries. The other item is before you. I hear the buzzer went off. If I can make a sentence on that one.
Okay, very quickly.
Thank you, sir. The LA Neighborhood Council Coalition, of which I am the secretary, and you've, I hope, seen many minutes, has been meeting almost weekly since the beginning of the year, 60 or more people. This is a proposal for a drastic change in the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, a very challenged part of our city. This recommendation, as it stands right now, isn't ready for public comment, but it is a way to save about $5-6 million in that budget, and I look forward to fleshing out the details at another time. Thank you for your courtesy.
We'll assume all those periods were commas on that last sentence. Thank you.
Compound sentence.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Simon.
Good afternoon. Stephen Simon, AIDS Coordinator for the City of Los Angeles. I don't have an agendized item, so I'm doing this under public comment. You have a written copy of my comments. I'll give you an abbreviated version here. Last week, I provided testimony before this committee in support of the Department on Disability as Executive Director in her request that the city retain the Department of Disability as a whole. On February 2nd, that was sent to Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging, as you know, and the mayor's February 4th urgent directive to all general manager made it clear that we were to move forward with the reduction of staff as outlined in the CAO's mid-year financial status report. The FSR specifically called for the retention of 7 specially funded positions comprising the AIDS Coordinator's Office and the Computerized Information Center, as well as 4 positions for the ADA Compliance Unit and Commission on Disability to be retained and transferred to the CDD and personnel, respectively. Unfortunately, the Executive Director, Department on Disability, whose position was targeted for elimination in the FSR, has begun the process of removing fully special funded staff from the AIDS Coordinator's Office to replace them with staff slated for termination in the FSR. Part of the plan also calls for removing one of the 2 ADA compliance specialists, which is mandated by the federal government, and moving him to the AIDS office. The rest is in writing there. I actually am suggesting and requesting a motion from this committee or any single member of this committee that either well, it's in writing there. I don't know how to really make it shorter. It's on the second page here. I'm very concerned that in not supporting the FSR, the actions that are being taken now are actually doing far more damage to the Department on Disability and our two primary functions, which are the Americans with Disability Act Division and the AIDS Coordinator's Office. I can gladly provide you with more information.
The CAO to look at this letter and get with you as it relates to your concerns, because one of the things we're all going to have to reconcile as it goes before council is exactly what those positions are. And the issue from the council perspective is we've asked the personnel department to get the machinery up and running, and that we come back within a 30-day period to evaluate what was going to be laid off. My understanding, it will take at least 30 days for that machinery to get rolling. And so I think the fact that the mayor's office, or the mayor directed general managers to move forward, I think he's under the same 30-day provision it's going to take for personnel department to get the machinery running. So I think we'll ask the CAO to look at your document, and as this process moves forward, to basically certainly evaluate your concerns and also see how they match the original CAO's report and what direction the council will eventually vote on.
Thank you. I appreciate it, sir.
Mr. Chair, I think there's also a bigger question, which I don't know about whether the council or the city attorney has really addressed yet, which is whether the mayor or the council gets to make the call on these layoffs and when and where, and I don't know how that impacts.
It's my understanding, and it was discussed in EERC, that by the charter, the general managers have that authority. The issue is it still requires the personnel department to have a machinery to cause that to occur.
Thank you.
And my final note would be these are fully special funded positions I'm referring to, and consistent with both the boards.
Those issues, I think you can work out with the CAO, and when all this comes back as a package, hopefully we've got those reconciled with what the CAO report and what your recommendations are. Thank you. Okay, we could have item number 5.
Item 5 is communication from the mayor's office relative to the appointment of Mr. Wayne Moore to the Board of Fire and Police Pension Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Why don't you give us, I think we have your resume, and it's very extensive as it relates to your financial background within the city of LA, and then moving over to both MTA and then SCAG. But how does that correlate or dovetail into the expected assignment to the pension commission, and how do you see those that background being of assistance to you in the city?
Well, as you mentioned, I have over 20 years of experience in the public sector in financial administration. And so I've been the budget director at the MTA. I've served at the Department of Public Works as the CFO, Assistant General Manager, Department of Transportation, and I am currently the Chief Financial Officer at Southern California Association of Governments. And in those capacities, I have been intimately involved in accounting and finance issues and financial administration issues. In my current position, I oversee our relationship with the California Public Employees Retirement System. I've had some extensive work with GASB 45 and healthcare benefits. On my personal side, I serve on a couple of other nonprofit boards where I help them manage foundation funds and serve on audit committees. And so I have an extensive knowledge and experience in administration, financial administration, public funds. I've been a public servant and a fiduciary in a number of organizations. And I think those skills, qualifications are well suited to serve on the Fire and Police Pension Board and to provide fiduciary responsibilities.
And then let me ask, have you filled out all of the necessary forms and for ethics and the other forms for this review? Because some of this material is not present in the package.
Well, I have completed all of the forms that the ethics department sent me and returned them as I was scheduled to do.
Okay. Let me ask, have you reviewed also Charter Section 222 and also Section 501E in the State Political Reform Act regarding conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest?
Yes, and I don't think I have any conflicts at all.
And I mean, but also current conflicts, but any future conflicts as it relates to items that you may be voting on, such as where you might have private investments and things of that nature?
I'm familiar with the fact that if there's any potential conflicts, especially with some of the groups I work with outside of the city, I would raise those with the city attorney's office and make sure I got some good guidance before I engaged in any activity that might even be perceived as a conflict.
Okay, and then also, the Ethics Commission, and we don't have this available right now, is supposed to make make the committee and the council aware of your prior contribution history if you participated in city elections.
I disclosed everything they asked me on the forms.
Let me, who's here from the mayor's office?
From the mayor's office?
Do we have a timing issue on this? As far
Ethics did complete their review. It was part of the package.
okay, I was looking for that, maybe I missed it. 'Cause I thought from our notes it reflected that they had not. What is the deadline on this particular application?
March 19th, is it? I think it's in March.
I believe it's like February 28th, no,
And so we
February
have-
26th.
So we have several council meetings before that? Okay. Mr. Smith?
I don't really have any questions. I know Mr. Lamar for many, many years, and I always found him to be a very capable government employee and a real asset to the people of Los Angeles, now SCAG, where I also am a member. And I would move it along. The police department, glad to see you there. First of all, you come to us also in an agency that both of our pension systems have been under scrutiny, and you bring to us expertise and background that has no issues of impropriety, investment policies in the back. You don't have any of those problems, and so I think you'd be a real asset to the organization and would move it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Corrett?
Well, you certainly have the background, and I appreciate your willingness to serve in this position. I have one question for you. I have a significant change that I have proposed in a motion to merge the three pension systems in terms of a number of their duplicative functions, following up an audit that showed that we could save $500 million in doing so over 30 years. What do you think of that proposal, and would you have any objections to it on its face?
I wouldn't have any real opinion. I would just say that the board would probably be, and I would be, in favor of providing you with any technical assistance and information you needed to make the decisions that you want to make, with staff support, of course. And since those are city charter, city council, mayoral issues, I would just look forward to carrying out whatever policy was developed.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenthal?
So SCAG and MTA is your most recent?
City of LA too. I've been here.
Well, you know the world then, quite well, and how it operates and doesn't
If you
operate.
can make it here.
Let me just ask you something about pensions and your general philosophy of it. Right now, the coalition puts in 6% into it, and when we cut the deal last year, it will go to 7% in the year 2011. I just got off the phone, that's why I was late, with an absolutely angry constituent, just screaming at me. He's got young children and everything. I was kind of misquoted, as happens around here, about the pension system. What I'm looking at in my own mind is potentially a motion on the ballot, or it's coming from a guy who used to be a state senator anyhow, to deal with employees' contributions to pension plans and the structural deficit that we as a big city face. You might not know this, I was a private sector guy. We didn't have the luxury of what government workers have. And government workers got it historically because they were underpaid and serving the public, and the private sector was more competitive. The last 20 years, it's been the reverse. Private sector's average working men and women have made less in real dollars. Corporate executives on the top have made zillions of dollars with great tax plans that make them unbelievably rich and not even paying their fair share. So that's what the private sector did. So a lot of private sector people are so angry right now because they don't want all of their tax dollars going to employees' health and pension and other parts. They want services. So how do you see this moment in time and the pension plans and the future of how we should deal with the issue?
Well, since I'm vested in a number of public employee retirement plans, I count myself as very fortunate to be in a position to have a defined benefits retirement. And all of us public servants are, really fortunate given the economic environment. And I understand the private sector employees' viewpoints, and over the longer term, in order to rectify what is perceived to be inequities, you're the ones who are going to have to make those kind of decisions. As I said earlier, we will be providing, with support of our staff, all of the technical information and all of the rational, clear analysis for you to make those kind of decisions, and then support them and hope that you make the best decisions that'll
Because one of the things I've said to the union leadership is that if the rank and file understood that they do understand this, but that it's an investment in themselves, that 6%, maybe it should go to 9%, something where they put in more, but it's more risk that they're taking. Unfortunately, we're in troubled times. For instance, it took me years, I ran a big corporation for a while, to convince that capitalist that we should have a 401k. For my workers, 16,000, we're getting nothing. And finally, we got a 401k for those people. And this was in the 90s, okay? In the mid-90s, we accomplished that. And that was the roughness of how the private sector treated its rank-and-file workers. Because there's no unions, and it's basically a very serious, at the top gets it all, and the workers, middle class, they put the jobs overseas even, where they can get cheaper labor. So the focus now is on how government in the new day can deal with it. And I really want you to focus and help me focus to see what we need to do on that, okay, going forward, because we can't ignore it anymore. Second thing is, you heard Mr. Koretz. For a year and a half now, I've been talking about the duplication of the three investment groups. It was presented to me, I've said it to the folks many times already, that you don't need three people when one can do that particular job, and there could be consolidation. And we need to do that. We have to figure out where we can consolidate and be more effective on that. Do you have an opinion of that thought at this point? Are you going to study it?
Yeah, that's a rational path forward. I'm sure we'll be taking a look at that because we'll have to make some recommendations. But as I said, ultimately the decision is going to be yours, and you'll have to rectify all of the interests that have a stake in the status quo and how we move forward.
Yeah, but I want you to know that your opinions will matter a lot to us. Obviously, we're the policymakers, but we're only as good as the input we get from people like you who know what you're talking about. We have to figure it out ourselves, but we look forward to leadership from you saying, maybe you should look at this or look at that or the other. Just don't sit there and it's our job.
No, we'll provide you with the best information possible,
Good.
Rational information that makes sense. So when you make your decisions, you will have all of the facts.
Bless you. Thank you.
Lorraine, what's the date for this coming to council?
The 19th.
December 19th, are you aware of that date? February 19th, I'm sorry. February 19th. February. Okay. February 19th. Okay. And can we just make sure, we double check, make sure all the records are there that are supposed to be, and we move forward? So, Mr. Moore, we'll see you on February 19th.
Thank you.
And one other thing I was going to mention, this committee has sent a report, the status of women's evaluation of the pension systems, and we have an expectation that each pension system is going to respond to it. And we can ask Monique and Ray when we can get that on our agenda, because it's been several months. And one of the major recommendations in that report is this merger of administrative overhead. And so if we can, if you get approved and get over there, that's a major priority to get that report before the committee and before the council.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, colleagues, if we can go on a consent, appreciate it before we leave, is that item 6, which is a withdrawal of a pension commissioner's name. Item 7 and 8 are both refunds within the confines of the Office of Finance. On item 9, also, this is an issue of a trust fund being eliminated. And also, I'd asked Lorraine, when this gets scheduled, ensure that the city attorney accompanies this report with the ordinance so that we can do it as one package. And then item 16, and that's dealing with, this is an administrative process on the JOBs that we've already agreed to go forward on, and so we have to get this before the council for approval. And so there's basically, I guess, a ministerial responsibility. And then number 17, so if we can get those on consent.
Yeah, the one thing I just wanted to ask about, not that we have to spend any time on it, those two that you said, item 7 and item 8,
Yes.
were overpayment of business tax.
Yes.
Of course, I'd like to keep any money now, we're broke.
Yes.
Overpayment, are we 100% sure that this is an overpayment at this point?
Yes, it's very sure. They've done audits. They validated that they overpaid. And the issue that once they make that validation, there's an interest we must pay from the date they requested all the way to the date we pay it. We recently approved in this committee and now the council to reduce the interest rate. So anything that comes to us after January 31st will have a significantly lower interest rate. If you look at the reports done by finance, you'll see at one time we were paying an exorbitant amount of interest. And in fact, on the item number 8, you'll see we paid on interest alone somewhere in the neighborhood of almost $11,000 for $159,000 overpayment. But these are all been validated by audits, and once they've validated it, the interest rate continues. So.
Okay. Just a couple of $100,000.
I know, but the issue is, I don't think we have any choice.
I got you. Okay.
So we'll move those items, and also, if we can ask on number 16, I'm assuming we need a placeholder on that so we can make sure that it gets to council as quickly as possible, dealing with the JOB, and we can give it the city attorney's office as to what timeline that is. So if we can move those items. So we'll go to closed session on items 1 through 4, and then we'll come back with the regular agenda items.
What you doing there, big guy?
session at the regular meeting of Budget and Finance Committee, and we have Mr. Rosenthal has joined us since we took that break, and so we have Mr. Caress, Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Smith, myself, Bernard Parks, and so we're first item.
I believe on item 4, you wanted to move that on consent as well now.
Is the issue that deals with the conflict statement, and so we'd ask that we move that on consent also. I thought earlier it was a full session item. So if we have no concerns on that, we go to the next item.
Okay, that moves us to item number 10, which is City Attorney and CAO reports relative to the proposed 13th-year grant award from the County of Los Angeles for the City Attorney's Victim Assistance Program, an amount of $856,817.
And this is item 10.
This is item 10.
Okay, let's go to the public. You could sit over here and we could have some seats for the public. I'm sorry. Public comment, and we'd ask that the city staff pay attention to the public comment, because you may have to cover, or you may cover some of these comments in your presentation. Catherine Roby, is it Mildred Wakefield, Martha Bees, you come up to the front. Comments on item 10. Okay.
Michael Walker.
Is that Michael Wakefield? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Michael Wakefield. Is Catherine Roby here? Martha Bees, come on up. Come on up. Martha Bees, Sandra Muntz. We have 4 people. Okay. Is someone not here? Catherine? Okay. Sandra Muntz is here.
Good
Okay.
afternoon, Councilman.
Okay, Farrell Robbins. So, come on up. We have 4 members, and then we'll hold Ms. Roby and see if she shows up. Okay, you want to start?
My name is Michael Walkenfeld. I have been privileged to be part of Los Angeles City Attorney Victim Witness Assistance Program as an auxiliary member for more than 20 years, a specialist reserve officer with Los Angeles Police Department for 18 years, and a former reserve detective with the San Fernando Police Department. I'm here today to personally attest to the value and importance of sustaining and maintaining Los Angeles City Attorney Victim Witness Assistance Program. I address you both as a clinical psychologist and as a member of the law enforcement community. From a psychological perspective, the emotional damage often sustained as a consequence to victimization can be devastating, negatively affecting one's functional capacity, interpersonal relationships, and occupational functioning. In addition, there is often a ripple effect in which friends and family members, coworkers, and community members are also impacted, as no one lives in a vacuum. As such, the impact of victimization affects all those individuals and the victim's immediate and extended social environment. The benefit of having a caring and compassionate advocate who provides emotional and practical support cannot be overstated. It is often the single determinant of a victim's ability to quickly regain a sense of control and safety, thereby diminishing the potential for resultant symptomology associated with trauma exposure and the development of more serious and distressful reactions such as post-traumatic stress disorder. From a law enforcement perspective, the cooperation of victims...
You have to wrap it up. That little buzzer.
I'm sorry. I'll just get to the bottom line. The Victim Witness Assistance Program provides emotional, logistical, practical support necessary to assist victims and witnesses through all stages of the criminal justice system. I can say without reservation this program has served a vital and unparalleled role in helping thousands of innocent victims rebuild their lives and regain their status as productive members of families and communities, and has been indispensable in facilitating the criminal justice system.
Let me just say, for those that come up, your time is on the monitor there. When the buzzer goes off, for fairness for everyone, that will allow you to complete your sentence, but not a page and not a book, but just the sentence. And
I
so,
apologize. I thought I had 2 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, now if you would relieve your seat, we'd have Emika Obi come up.
Only Spanish is okay?
Sure. Yes.
Only Spanish.
Well, hold on, we'll get you an interpreter, just a second.
Okay.
Have an interpreter come up? Yes, translate. Pardon? Okay, good. So give her a chance to, as far as time, that she can interpret what you're saying, okay?
Okay.
Usted me va a ayudar. Estoy aquí para apoyar el programa. Soy una esposa de alguien que sufrió víctima de crimen. Me quedé con 6 hijos. Y me ayudó bastante su programa, su ayuda. Tengo ahorita los 2 menores, me quedaron 3 menores de edad. Y los de los 3 menores de edad, los 2 más grandes ya ingresaron a la universidad y están continuando los estudios y nos han ayudado mucho el programa, todo lo económico, lo que y terapia.
Because of
Gracias.
the interpretation, you have something else to say, you can continue your thought, because it does take a little longer.
Puede seguir hablando, yo puedo repetir
Okay.
después de usted.
Okay.
No tiene que esperar.
Estoy aquí para darles las
I'm
gracias
just here to thank them.
y ojalá y puedan continuar con el programa.
Let them continue with their program.
Es muy
It's
necesario
very necessary
por el crimen que hay
because of the
en la
crime
ciudad.
that happens here in the city.
Y les doy muchísimas
And I
gracias
just
por
want to
todo.
thank them. I want to thank them for everything.
Ojalá y puedan continuar el
And I
programa.
hope that this continues, that the program stays.
Could you repeat your name for the record?
Su nombre, por favor. para-
Marta Beas.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Gracias.
And could we have Kim Roth come up in the empty seat?
Good morning. My name is Farrell Robbins. I'm the Executive Director for Loved Ones Victim Services. And we are one of the partners with the City Attorney's Office. And I'm here, Victim Advocate's Office, I'm sorry. I'm here in support to ask you to please consider leaving the Victims of Crime Office as it is. We've already lost many advocates during the year previously, and our clients really depend on these advocates. It makes a difference when there's a crime with a family. They are the first responders. Not only that, there are a lot of people in the community that take advantage of the families when something occurs, and they're there to be their to advocate on their behalf. I have had to use the service personally, not only professionally. I've worked with them professionally for 17 years. 10 years ago, my brother was killed, and I had to use the services. And so I know the impact of having a victim advocate, because even though you're ready, you think you can handle it, you can't when it becomes personal. So I urge you to please reconsider.
Thank you. And we could have Bill Avery come in this seat here, and then we can start over here.
Good afternoon, Councilman. I've been an LAPD volunteer for 20 years.
Your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Sandra Munns. I've been an LAPD volunteer for 20 years. For a short time, I also volunteered with the crisis response team. And while volunteering, I became acquainted with the city attorney's advocates, their victims' advocates. These people provide a service to the citizens of Los Angeles that cannot be measured by counting numbers of victims served, claims and cases cleared, or suspects jailed. The victims' advocates offer not only immediate access to resources, but knowledgeable answers to questions and moral support at a time when it's most desperately needed. When victims and families feel they are most vulnerable, these trained, compassionate individuals can be a calming voice, a way out of an abusive situation, or an answered prayer when they feel most alone. I've seen this happen. That's why I sent you this. Excuse me. This very positive and beneficial asset goes virtually unknown to the average citizen until they find themselves in that position. You yourself know, Council. Anyway, I hope you please consider keeping this program. I know you have a difficult job ahead, but please consider keeping them. Thank you.
We have Sister Regina Dill up, and then we can start with Mr. Obi.
Good afternoon. My name is Emeka Obi, and I work with the Executive Director of MLAC Health Services. I've been working with the Victims Assistance Program people at the stations to counsel the victims. Why I'm here today is to support the victims advocacy program because it actually saves the city money. A whole lot of victims that are out there, they want to go back and revenge. And when they are out there to revenge without mental health counseling, what happens? The crime rate spikes up. The city spends even more money to look for them and arrest them. They turn from victims and becomes offenders. Please leave this program because cutting it off will become penny wise, pound foolish for the city. I do not see how a victim can be recouped if without these people. They work very hard for the community. Thank you.
Very much. Also, we have Lavere Sandoval come up in that second seat. We'll start with Ms. Roth.
Kim Roth, I'm the director for Valley Trauma Center. We work with families with domestic violence, sexual violence, and child maltreatment. I'm here today to ask you to please maintain the funding for this program. It's vital to you in the city. If an individual is thinking of fleeing her batterer, we have a very small window of time to be able to relocate that individual. This program is critical to receive the funding to keep that individual safe. Her choice or his choice to return to the batterer could ultimately mean the loss of their life. This program steps in, it relocates people in a moment of crisis, it provides the necessary support. Ultimately, I think it saves the city money in costs in investigating long-term crime. So again, please save the program and maintain the funding. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Maria Suarez come up into the third seat, and Mr. Avery.
Yes. My name is Bill Avery, a victim of a hit and run in 2005. I spent 29 years with KCAL CBS, and one day I was hit on my bicycle. I think this program is absolutely necessary to meet the expenses incurred by an individual or individuals as a result of a criminal act against said individuals. In most cases, the persons affected incur cost at no fault of their own. Whether one has or does not have insurance should not be a determining factor. Many times, even an insurance policy may not cover all the costs. Myself, I had to have multiple surgeries, 4 plastic surgeries on my face, 1 on my leg, 1 on my knee, and 2 more are required on my back and another knee.
Thank you very much. Sister?
I am Sister Regina Marie, Good Shepherd Sisters. We run the Good Shepherd Shelter for the domestic violence for women and children. And with this program, we gear towards the healing for the mother and their children. They have therapy, but we all see that they're able to have that and to help them to overcome the trauma of domestic violence. And with this program also, that when the family ready to move out, they is able to help them to relocate. So we really need this program to help our families to get healed and become a good citizens, and the children also become good citizens for our city. Also that with this program that help us in the success rate of our shelter, over 80% that to help this family to rebuild and have a good and new life. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see just one more time. Is Catherine Roby here? We'll put a card in for the record. Okay, next.
Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Sandoval, and I'm a bilingual clinical social worker at Women Helping Women, part of National Council of Jewish Women. And I'd like to quickly read a story of one of our clients. Katie's an 18-year-old girl who was molested by her father from the time she was born until she was 13 years old, when her brother Sean walked in on their father raping his sister. His disclosure brought the family to LAPD, where a report was made. Their investigation revealed that Katie's father had also molested 2 other sisters and physically abused the entire family, including the children's mother. With the support of the Victims Compensation Program, Katie's mother was provided compensation for the time she spent in court, for their arraignment, preliminary hearing, and 2 full-length trials. Equally important, Katie has received extensive individual therapy as well as family and group treatment. Despite a hung jury at the first trial, Katie found the strength to testify again, and her father is serving 3 consecutive life sentences for his crimes. Katie has told me that her therapy literally saved her life, following a nearly fatal suicide attempt last year. Without VOC, I truly believe Katie would not be alive and headed for a brighter future at Mills College. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Suarez, and I'm a coordinator from National Council of Jewish Women, and I'm here to read a letter to one of our former clients, Salma. It's a young woman who escaped an extremely abusive relationship and transformed her life with the support of the Victims Compensation Program. Alma met her perpetrator, Leon, when she was in a high school and moved in with him at the age of 17 to escape a violent home life. She was pregnant with her daughter, Elena, by the age of 18, at which point her boyfriend became very emotionally and physically abusive towards her. In 1997, Alma's boyfriend attempted to rape her, at which point she had him arrested, ended the relationship, and moved out of their home with her daughter. She has full custody of Elena since that time.
You can finish the thought.
Over the next 10 years, Leon continuously harassed Alma by stalking her at work and threatened her to attack, kidnap her, and move to Mexico. Since their separation, he had been out in jail. I'm sorry, my glasses I'm having a problem.
Perfectly.
He has been in and out of jail and various charges, including attempt murder and abuse, drugs and alcohol regularly. Alma has obtained multiple restraining orders, and with the financial situation...
Ms. Forrest, can you conclude it now?
Yes. As young evaluation that she thought the budget, I cannot see well.
Okay. You want to leave that with us, your written statement? For the
The
record?
written statement is that actually this lady has been helped with the victims of crime, and it's something that we all need.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We have city staff come up for item 10. Ms. Roby?
Yes.
Did you come in? Are you?
Here.
Why don't you come up on this other mic, and because we called you a couple of times. Why don't you make your comments?
Thank you. As I catch my breath, I was trying to get here from the parking lot. Good afternoon, honorable council members. My name is Catherine Roby. I'm the Operations Council Chair for MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. What I'd like you to know about me is I was born and raised in this great city. I'm a mother of 4. I'm a retired Los Angeles police officer. But most importantly, what I want you to know about me is that I am a victim. I'm a victim, and I'm a survivor. I'm a victim and a survivor of a drunk driver. 3 years ago, my 12-year-old daughter and I were almost killed by a 4th-time DUI offender. We were both seriously injured, and my 12-year-old daughter was left temporarily disabled. My family knows firsthand the devastating impacts imposed on innocent crime victims. There's a severe physical and emotional trauma, as well as the huge financial burden to victims to pay for incurred damages and medical bills. I know how important the City Attorney Office programs are to crime victims and their families. No crime victim should ever be turned away because there's no one to serve them. Equally important is the fact that the federal government has all but abandoned community programs and funding. It is all left up to the cities and charity organizations and their programs to provide these critical and much-needed services.
Okay, could you wrap it up?
I'm sorry?
Your time is up. Could you wrap it up?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
As a representative of those you serve and those who so badly need your support, please do not abandon them. On behalf of Matt and those we serve, we implore you to stand up for those people and keep these services available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here we have the city staff.
Yes.
You start your presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Tanel. I'm the Director of the City Attorney's Victim Assistance Program. I'm here with Kathy Calabong, who is my Assistant Director. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all the supporters who came here today to take time out of their busy schedules to show their support for our program. Their comments clearly demonstrate the need for the City of Los Angeles to continue to support the vital and life-saving critical services that the Victim Assistance Program provides to the residents of this community. You also receive packages here with support letters. I presented it to the clerk that has a list of different kinds of support letters from law enforcement, from some of our providers, so you have those to look through if you have an opportunity. Each year we help more than 7,000 new misdemeanor and felony violent crime victims in the City of Los Angeles, which include assault, child abuse, elder abuse, hit and run, drunk driving, domestic violence, and surviving family members of homicide. In the past 5 years, the program has paid out over $30 million for medical expenses, loss of wages, mental health counseling, funeral and burial expenses, and emergency relocation. And advocates over the past 5 years provided 4,500 court escorts to victims, which help to successfully prosecute criminal offenders. This program is committed to promoting victims' rights and increasing awareness of the services that are available in the community to help residents. And based upon this commitment, over the past 5 years, the program has conducted 1,153 presentations and trainings to nonprofit community groups, agencies, law enforcement, criminal justice personnel, and Los Angeles City Council field staff. Leverage of dollars. The program receives $1,690,510 in total grant awards, which pays for all salaries, costs, and operating expenses. These expenses are reimbursed in full to the city's general fund. It makes good, responsible sense for the City of Los Angeles to leverage these dollars and continue to support the Victim Assistance Program, which provides vital services that heal and promote public safety in our community. Today, we are asking that the Budget and Finance Committee support the CAO's recommendation to approve all 3 grants at their current staffing levels, so we can continue to provide much-needed and vital victim services to the residents of the city.
You still approve all 3?
Well, we have 3 items on the agenda for...
Okay, but we're dealing with 10 right now.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just ask, on the notes, it shows you handled 7,499 new cases. Do you have an ongoing workload from previous years, or is each year you start off with just the cases in that given year?
Each year we start with the new cases.
Okay, so that's 7,400 cases for this year. So you've at least resolved or done what you could for all of last fiscal year cases.
We still continue to provide services. Some cases require ongoing assistance. And as long as they need help, we're there to assist them.
So there's no timeline as it relates to providing the service. So they could be an 07 case or an 06 case if there's some repeated issues.
Correct. As some of the speakers have mentioned, some of them go way back to 1990s.
Okay, the case may go back that far, but are you providing services for those dated cases?
We are, yes.
Okay. All right. The other issue I wanted to ask you about is that you mentioned that these locations are sited at police stations and, I guess, decentralized city attorney offices.
Correct.
But I couldn't find specifically where.
We have branch offices that include Newton. You're talking about the city branch office?
Well, I want to find out where are these, I'm assuming there's 12 employees.
Right.
Are all of them out into field locations, and if they are, what field locations?
In a combination of city attorney offices and LAPD police division.
I mean, but what locations?
Newton Division, 77th.
We do have an organizational chart that will explain all the offices if you care to.
Do you have that for the committee? Is that something we could share? So that would show the location of the 12 bodies?
Right.
Okay, now is there an administrative function down at the city attorney's office, or all of these people out in the field?
We have a combination of staff that are in our central office downtown, and we have other staff that are located in the police divisions.
And how many people are in the field?
We have 8 staff in the field. Those locations are Newton, 77, Hollenbeck, Wilshire, Olympic, Northeast, and North Hollywood. And we have staff in the San Pedro City Attorney's Office, and a staff member located in Van Nuys, and another staff member downtown in our central office.
So you have one person downtown?
One person in this particular grant.
Okay. I mean, as far as the administrative.
Right.
And then, so as you've lost people over time, what do they just handle a larger area of responsibility? So
Right.
if you, I think you went from, what is it? I think you lost 5 bodies over the last couple.
Actually lost 7 positions, or actually 5 victim advocates from last
Okay,
year.
so how does that, you reconfigure the work, that the 77th person handles a larger area?
Well, based on the amount of crime that occurs in 77th, we typically have 2 victim advocates in that location. We're down to just
Okay,
1.
so it could have been 2, now you have 1.
Now we have 1. We had to close one of our field offices last fiscal year because of the reduction of 17% to our program. So we had an advocate that worked in the West LA Police Division, and we had to move that advocate out.
Okay. Let me just ask, one of my concerns on the sense of cost, I know there's a matching requirement, but the one area of the overhead that we are not reimbursed, any idea on how to close that gap of about $141,000?
Well, we're looking at trying to become directly funded from the state of California. I've worked with Cal EMA to discuss options about becoming directly funded, but it's going to require a legislative change that we've talked about in the Audits and Government Efficiency Committee. And they're not at a position where they can actually introduce new legislation at this point. It would require that the city and the council and folks on the local level would help get that legislation introduced so that we become directly funded by the state of California. Then we would increase the amount of money that we would get for our grants, because I think the portion that we get right now from the county's grant, because we're a sub-grantee, is only 25%. The county gets 75% of that total grant award.
Okay.
And
And then my final question is that in looking at the grant itself, any word from the state that the condition of their budget, whether this year or future year funding is in jeopardy?
now, the funding at this point is solvent. There's no issues at this point in terms of funding being affected in future years, as far as I understand.
Okay, so we're sure for 09-10, but have we gotten the commitment for 10-11?
We know the funding is going to be available, so yes.
Why is this getting to us so late, this paperwork? This stuff was, we're halfway through the fiscal year.
I don't have,
Well, the initial transmittal was submitted in July, and then the first report was heard in November in audits. I'd have to look back at my notes to see why there was some delay.
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing problem, and we've been talking about it for 3 years, I think, 4 years, that this stuff goes on. We're halfway through the budget year, and we're just now getting the approvals. This one's not as bad. There's some grants that are, 50% are paid by the city. And that stuff, we're just not going to pay it anymore. This one doesn't fall in that category, but it's still an impact to our budget. And we're partway through the year. We're trying to make cuts instead of expansion. And we got to pick up $184,000 of this grant. So while it's a wonderful grant, our questions have been repeatedly in this committee, can we afford to do it now any longer? So I just don't know why we're sitting here in this part of the year looking at a grant proposal half over.
Well, the way the grant has been submitted in the past couple of years, overhead was never included as part of the cost analysis.
Overhead in the form of cap, or overhead in the form of?
Overhead related to the cap.
Oh, the cap.
Right. So it always appeared that it was a cost-neutral program. And my office just released a cap report last year, and in discussions with city attorney, we have now included that information in your report, along with modifying some of the budget, some of the salary savings that have occurred from the furloughs and the reduced work schedules, and we've used that now towards fringe benefits. So some of those discussions were taking place. I'd have to look back at my notes to see if that's why the report was delayed. But those discussions were taking place as far as trying to modify how the money was going to be used.
So I'm just, a question for us. So are we making the decision today on whether to leave the funding at the previous level or cut one or two staffers?
I got the question to the CAO as to just what some of those options mean, so he can let us know what that means in a sense of if you reduce it one. Because my concern is to try to reduce the 141 unreimbursed funds. How much can we reduce that?
Well, I have the same question, so.
So we're going to get to see it.
Yeah, obviously, all those who came and spoke about the program, it's a no-brainer. It's obviously a prevention, intervention, and supportive strategy of dealing with an issue. The question that we're going to have to deal with is the funding. The matching monies, got to have the matching monies to get the other money. So that's one issue, but Mr. Parks will go into the other part of it. But I just want to thank the groups who came for making a difference with people's lives out there. We'll see what the next part of it is.
Let me just ask you, Ray, one of the things I didn't quite understand, the CAO gave us a couple of options, and also, because you did the report, I should direct it to you. But you gave us three options. The one thing I didn't understand on option 3 was that you stated that if you were to reduce 2 positions, there would be unexpended state monies. Now, what does that mean, and where would those monies go?
What that means is you wouldn't be able to spend all of the grant award.
Okay.
So there's a possibility that some of it would either go back, or we would see if we could reprogram it for the next year.
Okay, but we have no guarantee of reprogramming.
We would have to request if we can reprogram that for 10-11.
Have we ever been successful at reprogramming?
We've always expended the money.
Right. The issue is, colleagues, what I would recommend in the sense that option 2 appears to get us down from 141 down to 45 for this year, in the sense of city non-reimbursable funds. We still have the 147,000 matching funds, which is the requirement of the grant. And so I would recommend that we move towards that second option goal of getting down to where the city's only responsible for 41,000. And I want to thank the CAO for reevaluating this grant in light of the CAP study, because the overhead and such was not a part of previous discussions, and the costs appeared neutral, but we found out later that they weren't cost neutral. And then the other thing I would suggest and ask the CAO and the department to work together and find, and before we consider 10-11 budget year, that we seriously look at what and how we might reduce the 147 matching fund, and whether there's other alternatives as it relates to next year's budget. Being that there were 6 months into this budget, or almost 7 months, that I think it's too far down the line to address the matching fund issue. But certainly, I think we can address the issue of the unreimbursed money, at least a portion of it. But I would not like to leave money on the table from the state. But again, it would give us that second option, gives best of both worlds. We can max out the grant, we can reduce $100,000 in city revenue, and still keep a program moving. But with that caveat, that we'd ask the CAO and the city attorney before the 10-11 budget, that we find out just what impact we can make on reducing to eliminating the matching.
Councilman, can I add something? Yes. Every time we lose a position, it's going to result in the closure of a branch office. So if we're reducing our grant by 2 positions, I have to close down 2 particular offices.
I think recommendation 2 basically, I think, reduces 1 position. And the thing is that what we also know, if we save 100,000, it also saves 2 people from being laid off. And so it's a balance of trying to find every dime that we can. And what we've said over and over, and particularly to the city attorney's office, we have had a long history of grants that we've overexpended on, and then often we continue to spend even when the grant is over. And so what we're trying to do is reduce all grants down to the cost, reduce the issue of city, number one mission is to reduce the cost of money that's not reimbursable. And the second issue is how do we address the matching funds? So those are the 2 approaches and this is exactly why this committee asked when we reassigned or redesigned the committee structure this year that we had an opportunity to review grants, because the policy committees often were so interested in getting the grant, they weren't looking at the impact on the general fund. So that's why that change was made, so this body could look at the general fund impact.
Okay. And one other thing I didn't mention too is that there's going to be an increase in the VOCA cap, which means there's going to be additional federal money coming down the pipeline for all victim programs across the state.
Is that for this year or for future?
That's coming, it should come before the end of this fiscal year.
Okay.
And
But
it's
that
about
would be
$70 million, so.
Okay, but that's for fiscal year 10-11? Or does it impact this grant?
This fiscal year. We haven't found out yet exactly how much money is going to trickle down to the county, which ends up coming down to the state, but it's going to be an increase.
Yeah. If it comes down that late in the year, then I would assume that it's not going to impact this grant, but probably 10-11. And so that's what we'd like to look at and share. So any other questions on that?
Just 2 things real quick. If you have to close an office, do you know which one? So the geography obviously wouldn't be more problematic for some people.
At this point, I would have to go back and reevaluate the program and the services that are provided to each of the police divisions where we have staff. So I'm not at a position yet to determine which office.
Did you have that by the time it comes to council?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the second thing is just what you said. You're hopeful the $70 million is going to go through the system, that it would be for this fiscal year. This is February, then there's March, April, May, and June. There's 4 more months in the fiscal year.
Yes.
And you're under the impression they're going to give you money for this year?
I am.
Or for next year, or both years, or what?
I think it's going to affect our current fiscal year and next fiscal year. I don't know at this point how much money is going to trickle down for us, and at what point it's going to get here during this current fiscal year.
Yeah.
But I believe it's going to hit us before the
Okay,
year's
if
over.
you believe it's going to come this year, this would then mean we wouldn't have to lay off anybody at this point?
Yes.
Do you have any sense of how you can get a better clarity on that? So
I
we
will
don't
do
have
everything in my power to find out as quickly as possible.
If you could make any effort or whatever, or ask some of the mayors, closer people, whatever, before it comes to council, if we could save that spot and at the same time have the monies to continue that spot next year. Obviously, none of us want to cut the program, but I mean, timing is everything at this point.
Right. Okay.
So if we get those 2 things back at council, and again, our number 1 priority is the overhead that's not reimbursed. But again, if you find out about new monies, we need to determine how that's impacted on that 141. And then for next year, we certainly need to ensure that the 147, if there's another way to address matching funds. Okay? Thank you very much. So we'll move that with those recommendations, and we'll adopt the CAO's recommendation 2 that deals with the reduction of the program by 1 position, and that we reduce the unreimbursed funds from 141,487 to 45,000.
Okay.
We have the next item.
All right, actually, we'll take us to item 11, but before we do that, I do want to just note that we handed out to everyone just a little spreadsheet that lines up the 3 grants related to items 10, 11, and 12, and gives you basically the cost of the grants and what the required match is and what overheads are not being, just as a reference tool. So,
Ray, one thing, I think I went too quickly on the one item that deals with the jobs, and so we need to reconsider that.
the GOB, okay, item 16, okay.
Item 16 we need to consider because I didn't include a presentation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 11, which is the city attorney report and CAO reports relative to a request for authorization to accept the proposed 11th year grant award for the Joint Powers of Verification Unit, an amount of $723,693.
Number 11.
I've made my statement already.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you may want to refresh us. 'Cause, I mean, we put up all our energy in number 10, so if you want us to go by number 11 on our memory.
Ida Rubio with the CAO office. The report before you discusses the city attorney's request for authority to accept the 11th year grant award for the Joint Powers of Verification Unit in the amount of $723,693. The grant period is from July 1st through June 30th. An additional addendum report was released, which provided additional information regarding match requirements, overhead reimbursements, and program impacts should any adjustments be considered. This grant provides funds to process both new and ongoing claims as submitted by the Victim Assistance Program and the Special Emphasis Victim Assistance Program. Approximately 14,000 claims and bills are processed on an average annual basis, and the funds come directly from LA County. For this grant, there is no match requirement, and the city is receiving the maximum reimbursement allowable for fringe and overhead. We will always have an overhead contribution. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The state allows only for a 10% reimbursement, and federal legislation allows for a 15% reimbursement.
Okay, let me, also on the state, we have no concerns about future funding?
No, we don't.
Okay. And then let me ask on the issue of this grant, there's no matching, but when we reconfigured the cap and everything, basically we have a $75,000 amount of money that's not reimbursable.
$75,000 is for overhead.
Overhead. Is there any way to reconfigure the grant to reduce that $75,000 at all?
Not without reducing the staffing level.
Okay, but I think the issue, but again, we're talking, I guess,
We've already included any salary savings from furloughs and reduced work hours towards fringe benefits or towards operating expenses.
okay, but this, but I think the issue that if we go with option 2, that reduces a position, we're only reducing the unpaid balance from 75 to 67.
Correct.
And we're not spending 79,000 of state funds. So there's not much benefit of the one position.
There's not much benefit to reducing it. You're only reducing it by pennies as far as the overhead costs.
Now, how does it impact the grant in that the city attorney has said they're only interested in applying for one of the 3 years?
Because they receive a total allocation, and then they only come back for authority and funding approval on a yearly basis, depending on, which is subject to your approval.
If I understand it, the grant is for a 3-year period? So are we approving?
You're only approving it for 1 year.
For 1 year. So the money, are we assured that if we come back the second year, that the money will be there?
Usually all contracts that come down from the county are all contingent on funding availability. So you will always get a transmittal every year asking for authority to accept a grant award for that particular year.
Let me just say on this one also, if we can ask the CAO and the city attorney on this item to, prior to accepting or applying for the 2010-11 grant, that we evaluate the $75,000 overhead reimbursement. We find whatever in our power to reduce that, to eliminate it, being that there is no match. And on all 3 of these grants, we'll just throw a line in there that all of them need to come to this committee and the council well in advance of the date we're receiving them, and that they start with the fiscal year, but we're addressing them at later than mid-year.
Councilman, I have something to add, too. The Victim Comp and Government Claims Board, the organization that administers our grant here, they have informed me that there may be some actual salary savings in other programs across the state, and at the end of, or close to the end of this fiscal year, they'll have a better idea how much money is left.
Okay.
They'll be willing to increase our grant award to make up any difference to decrease our impact on the general fund once that funding does become available, so.
Now, if they increase our award, that doesn't cost us larger amount of money that we have to get reimbursed, unreimbursed, or are they just going to take care of our unreimbursed funds?
The unreimbursed funds.
Okay. All right, we can work with the CAO on that, and if that comes through, that would be a positive.
No, that's very positive. I appreciate it.
Oh. Okay, we'll move that item, and with a specific request that the city attorney work with the CAO regarding the unreimbursed $75,771, and also work with the CAO and the CAO and the city attorney on if new or additional funds are forthcoming to reduce this impact on the general fund for this year, that we seek those funds. Okay, next item.
Okay, item 12, the city attorney report and CAO reports relative to request for authorization to accept the proposed 17th year grant award for the Special Emphasis Victim Assistance Program, an amount of $110,000.
Okay, we have a brief CAO report on this.
Okay, again, the CAO report before you discusses city attorney's request to accept the 17th year grant award for the Special Emphasis Victim Assistance Program for $110,000 for the grant period of July 1st, 2009 through June 30th, 2010. You also have an additional addendum report regarding matching requirements, overhead reimbursements, and program impacts, if any adjustments be considered. For this particular grant, it is federally funded, so there is a match of $27,500 required in order for us to receive the money. The overhead costs, which are not reimbursed, are reflect the amount of money that's not being able to be recouped.
Yeah. This is one of the grants I think we've talked about for years, and I think Mr. Smith just commented. We're going after a $110,000 grant, and the city's spending $56,000 of its own money to either match or pay the overhead. And what I'm wondering about in looking at this particular function, is it something that can be done without this grant, or is this activity of such a concern that we find that we must continue it, because these are the grants that are upside down before we get started?
Well, and Special Emphasis Victim Assistance Program, it outreaches to the Korean community. It's a special skill set involved to be able to be bilingual, obviously, in Korean and in English. So it's not a lot of staff available that have that type of skill set. I don't believe, we don't have anybody in our current victim assistance grant who is both bilingual in English and in Korean, so we have to keep that function with the Special Emphasis Program so they can address the needs in that particular community.
Okay. Have we made any effort to reach out to the Korean community, some of their service centers and their variety of different service organizations to assist in providing those language skills?
Yes, we do partner with agencies. However, in the victim assistance program, it does take a specialized skill. We receive 40 hours of entry-level training, which is all state mandated. So we do utilize resources in the community and partner with them. But it's also really important, because of the skill involved in going through the criminal justice system, that this program exists and is available to the city residents.
This program could not be merged into, what was item 10?
Into the Victim Assistance Program grant? No.
I mean, as far as the special element?
I don't believe it can, no.
Now, how many people work this?
We're assigned 2 staff members for this particular grant. Currently, we only have 1 staff working this grant. One of our other victim assistance, Special Emphasis Victim Assistance Program employees left to continue their education and get their graduate degree. So we only have 1 staff member.
And why couldn't this particular function merge into item 10? What would be the prohibition?
It's 2 separate grants.
I understand the grant, but I mean, the functions appear to be fairly similar. This one is just zeroed in on the Korean community, where the other grant is zeroed in on the larger community. So I'm just wondering why we could not have an element of item 10 to address this specific need, and not have this additional $56,000 that the city has to come forward on?
What we found in working with the community, that it was so important that we needed to have somebody who had the specialized bilingual skills to work with them through the system. That is something we found more responsive. Prior to having this program, we tried to go into the community, and it wasn't as receivable because we weren't speaking their language directly, and to work through a translator would take away a little bit in that community. So we found this very beneficial in successfully reaching the victims.
Let me just throw one thing at you. When I look at your report on item 10, and you mentioned Olympic Station, which
Yes.
is primarily Koreatown,
Yes.
with the largest population. What I'm asking is that if the people on item 10 have bilingual skills and understand the Korean community, can they perform the service that you're asking us to fund in item 12? Because it seems like they're one and the same. Where are we locating staff on item 12?
In the Olympic Station.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so they're there with personnel from item 10.
Item 10, we don't have.
We don't have a bilingual Korean English speaker in the victim assistance.
I know,
Right.
that's what I'm saying.
Right.
If we did, could it then be converted to serve both purposes? So if you have a Korean or bilingual person that's in item 12, all of a sudden become the person in item 10, would we be able to serve both issues
That's
out
a
of
possibility,
one grant?
Councilman. Yes, it's a
And not have
possibility.
to have $50,000 we have to pay for a separate grant?
That's a possibility, yes.
That's all I'm asking. Is that possible? Because I would assume that's what most of your services are at the Olympic Station.
Right.
Maybe primarily Korean.
Right.
And if on item 10, if they're primarily Korean related and they do not have a bilingual skill, then we're not serving the public very well.
The person at the Olympic Station is from this grant. He is our bilingual Korean advocate, and he is assigned to the Olympic Station.
Okay, now, you got to be confusing me now, because you said they were separate and they couldn't be merged. So what's funding what now? So is item 12 funding the position in item 10, Olympic Station? Or do we have a person funded from item 10 at Olympic and in item 12, a person funded from that grant? So are they two people we're dealing with, or is it one and the same?
Just one. We used to have a number 10 advocate there, but with the loss of positions, we have our special emphasis advocate at Olympic in order to provide services to the Korean community.
So are we double counting the grants then? Are we counting Olympic Station in item 10 as a position providing this service, and then we're counting it again in item 12?
No, we're not double counting. I think what Kathy's saying, at one point we had a advocate from the VAT grant at Olympic Station. When we took the 17% reduction in our staffing levels, we had to move some folks around. So we pulled that advocate out of the VAT grant, out of the Olympic Station, put that person somewhere else. Now we just have the Korean advocate. Since Olympic reporting districts cover all of Koreatown, put that advocate in Olympic Police Division. So we're not counting twice, just once.
Okay, let me ask the CAO. I think we need to resolve on item 12. If there's a special need for Korean outreach and language skills, and that's the grant for the 100,000, and they're asking us to put another 50 with it, 56. And we're also looking at the grant on item 10 that houses people at Olympic, and they're doing basically the same issues within the same community. Why we can't consider using item 10 as the grant, and do we still need item 12?
Well, I would agree. I think that was part of the purpose of putting it together, the spreadsheet, and we know it basically the grants fund the unit, and so we'll work with the city attorney's office.
If we could hold item 12 until you get that resolved, okay? Because it just doesn't appear. It seems like we're putting double services in the same area, and the issue for number 10, it appears we're already paying our resources as it relates to matching funds and overhead.
Okay, we'll get back, we'll get with the office and come back to you really for the next meeting that we have so we can get this resolved this year, yeah.
We don't have another meeting
But-
until...
To 2 weeks,
about
right?
15.
Yeah, we're out the 15th, and then we have budget on the road on the 22nd.
Well, let me ask you, was it easier, do you get this resolved on the fly before they come to council?
You know, I think we can probably do that before we get
Yeah.
to council. We'd like to get it wrapped up, resolved for this year. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's ask you to resolve those.
How long do they need to get the council then?
Yep.
Be a public hearing 19th.
Yeah, what do you need in time before you can resolve that and we schedule for council?
Okay, well, let us sit with the city attorney's office and,
Because all three of these should come at one time or else.
Yes, I would-
You have to give us another chart.
agree.
And if I may add, there is a little sense of urgency. They are starting to run a little short on their grant dollars for salary expenses.
So we would like 10, 11, and 12 to be dealt with at the same time
Okay.
at the council, and we need to resolve the impact of number
12.
12 with number 10.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we'll move item 12.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 13, the city attorney report relative to a contract agreement between the Office of the City Attorney Dispute Resolution Program and the Los Angeles County Community and Senior Services for fiscal year 2009-10.
Before you get started, we have one public comment. Dr. Weissman, just let him sit in that open seat there.
I thought he had to leave. He
Oh, you
told me he
just-
had to leave. He was just
Okay.
going to say something in support, but he said he didn't have time.
All right, very good. Then we'll put his name on file. Okay, we start the presentation on item 13.
City Attorney is requesting authorization to accept and execute an agreement for the proposed 20th year dispute resolution program in the amount of $390,930 from the County of Los Angeles. Proposed grant period is for July 1st, 2009 through June 30th, 2010. Dispute resolution program provides comprehensive services that include referral information, mediation, conciliation, facilitation of services to resolve disputes outside of a formal court proceeding. The City of Los Angeles was recently awarded funding from the County of Los Angeles for a 5-year term for a maximum amount of $1.9 million as part of a recent RFP process. Funding will be allocated on a yearly basis and is conditional upon availability of funds. At this time, authority and funding appropriations are being requested only for the first year. Total cost of the program is $781,860, which includes a 1-to-1 match. There is a report, a CAO report that has been drafted and will be released to council or to your committee before this goes to council. It does have a slight budget modification, which shows that some of the salary savings which have come about because of the furlough hours and the reduced work schedule will now be used towards fringe benefits.
Okay, so that's in the CAO's report?
Yes, it is.
Because that was somewhat confusing, that you listed that information in items 10, 11, and 12, but it wasn't in 13 to see how those numbers get reconfigured.
It's in my, well, the budget modification, which the city attorney's office will be submitting to the county, includes how the reallocation will take place among what categories. But I don't show, what I don't show is the difference between what was submitted in the city attorney's transmittal in comparison to the budget modification.
Okay, do you have a copy of that draft report for the
Yeah.
committee? Do you
Yes,
have
I
copies?
do. I could give you mine. I don't have multiple copies. I only have one copy.
Could we get copies for the committee so they're aware of what some of the changes might be? And what's unique about this grant is that it's a one-for-one match.
It's a 1-to-1 match, yes. So for every dollar, every dollar that we receive, we have to submit $1 in matching costs.
And the one thing, and I think we discussed it at length last year, we asked the CAO to work with the department from last year about reducing any city costs outside of the match. And I think there was a discussion about reduction of volunteer hours.
Yes, there was. I was.
Explain to us, how does that reduce the costs on, are they paid?
The volunteers are not paid at all. The state allows $25. The State Dispute Resolution Programs Act allows us to indicate in-kind services are provided as part of the match, $25 per hour of volunteers.
Okay, so it's used as in-kind.
In-kind.
It's not real money.
No, it's money to us,
Yes,
because,
but
that's what we're able to use.
Dollars.
No.
We're just using it against the match.
That's right,
Okay.
against the match.
Very good.
And so, of course, the more volunteers that we can recruit and train, the more we can use in-kind services. But we're kind of at our limit in terms of staff capability in handling the training and supervision and all that of volunteer staff members. There are 5 full-time staff members.
Is there any, you've been working at this for a while, any thought on how we can reduce the city's match from 1-to-1 to a smaller percentage?
Legislatively, that's it.
That's
The state legislature would have to change the California Dispute Resolution Programs Act. They've actually thought about it, changing it. We have over the years made recommendations about changing that match, but they have not done it yet. It's not been changed.
Any thought on, with the budget condition in the state, whether these monies are secure for future years?
Now, remember, she said that they have funded us through 2014. They've already, and what I think occurred, and I have not verified this, but I do think that we were being underfunded in past years, and that they scrubbed those accounts at the county and found so much money that they felt very confident that they could fund all of the dispute resolution programs that are grant funded through 2014.
Great.
I do
This is state money coming through the county?
No, it is the state statute
Okay.
that allows the county to increase civil filing fees to grant fund dispute resolution programs locally. So we're a grantee of the County Department of Community and Senior Services.
Are the volunteer hours capped?
They are not capped. The $25 per hour is capped, right?
Yeah.
That can also, and that's been the same since 1986. That's also an area that we have wanted to change legislatively.
But still, the more volunteer hours you get, the more you can charge.
That's exactly right. But we
still pay the 1-to-1 on the volunteer versus paid staff.
I don't think that I quite understand the question.
We have to match our match. So when you charge a paid person's time, we match it 1-to-1, right?
Yes. So, for instance, I'm sorry.
And then volunteer time that you charge the grant, do we match our share on that too? Or?
Yes. So for example, they have increased their volunteer hours to reflect $211,000. So we have to match that $211,000 with city funds
in order to get the reimbursement.
Yeah. And then, but that's capped at $25.
$25 an hour.
On the volunteer time, is there a cap fee added to that too, or is that?
No, that is disallowed specifically by the California Dispute Resolution Programs Act, the fringe benefits and the cap.
Because there aren't any fringe benefits, but there are cap-related costs.
To volunteers?
Yeah. There's some, and, cap gets into a lot of variety of things, but administrative oversight.
Right. You know what? We didn't do the cap rates for our volunteers.
For the volunteers.
Yeah, we hadn't done that. We were trying to think of other things that applied, and nobody thought of that one. So that's a very good one. The cap rates, I think that would be good.
Maybe some of it. You can't obviously.
Right.
There's
That's
no
right.
pension benefits,
Some of
but
it.
there
That's
are
right.
cost factors.
But that's right. It does only specifically say that fringe benefits can't be an in-kind. But, yeah, I don't see why not cap rates. I think that's something that we're likely able to negotiate with the county. They've been very open with us.
Okay. One of the things to ask is that you look into that issue Mr. Smith just brought up, and that also, as we've asked on other grants, that we continue to work with the CAO and the City Attorney's Office to look at future grants as it relates to that matching funds. Can we reduce it, mitigate it, and what we have to do legislatively, or whatever the process may be, that we continue that effort so that we can, at minimum, reduce it and hopefully at some point eliminate that one-for-one. But we'll move the recommendations with that one addition that Mr. Smith asked, to reconsider the cap rate on the
volunteer hours. Yeah, that would be, I think that would be very good.
All right. Any other questions? So we move item 13.
Okay, item 14 is Board of Review report relative to a write-off request of delinquent accounts receivable of $5,000 and over.
Let me just ask, I think we've all read this. Just let me ask a couple of quick questions. One thing in your report, you comment on different departments having different statutes. Is that, who sets that, and why aren't they standardized as relates to one department's 3 years, one's 4? I think some of the other departments are 5. We're dealing with ambulance fees or something like that. Is that a city issue as to why the statutes are different per department or different per type of fee?
The city doesn't establish a statute per se, but we have operated, generally speaking, on a 3-year statute for most accounts, unless it states otherwise. Some research that's been performed by both the controller indicates that some should be under a 4-year statute, and then traffic citations from the Department of Transportation are a 5-year statute.
But the board is operated on 4 years.
I didn't hear you.
The board has operated on 4 years.
4 years? That's the Board of Review.
Right.
Okay. Let me ask on the also on these issues. It's unclear that sometimes we get these reports in and the department will file liens, even if they've been unsuccessful at recovering the funds. Sometimes they don't. What makes it a case that will allow liens, and what makes it a case that they ignore the liens?
There are really only 2 departments right now that actively file liens, and we encourage them as much as possible to use them. Now, these accounts that you see today, because they're already out of statute, it somewhat becomes a moot point. But whenever possible, they should be utilizing that practice. And as you are aware, we're doing some research now to be able to expand that lien process.
Do you know where that is? Is that an ordinance or something that we're waiting for? Allow Department of Finance?
It's with the city attorney right now. We're expecting a report back from them in regard to that. So as soon as that is complete, in fact, we're going to be meeting with them to expedite the completion of that report. So as soon as that's prepared, then yes, there will be an ordinance moving forward.
Okay. Could we have when this comes to council, could you ensure we have an update on where we are on those issues?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then did these go through the process through Department of Finance in the sense of their primary debt collectors before they went to the issue of the statute?
That is correct. All these accounts have gone through the collection process, and all collection attempts have been exhausted.
Just looking at this list of non-compliance, bad checks, et cetera. On bad checks, one of them was a corporation. When we get a corporate bad check, do we immediately we send them a letter saying we want the money, But after that, and they don't pay within a certain time frame, what happens to that corporation? Do we go back to them? Do we try and locate them? Are these companies are no longer in business? I mean, why are they here?
And I must apologize because that particular one off the top of my head I don't remember, but that is often the case with corporate accounts. When I say all the collection attempts have been exhausted, not only through the Office of Finance, but also through our outside collection agencies, they will often find that it's either out of business, which is often the case. I can't say that that is the case here, or that is always the case, but they've exhausted all practical collection attempts. Is it possible that they're still operating in business and we simply haven't collected? Yes. But there's, in terms of recourse of addressing that on a different level, it's somewhat limited.
I wish it would state on here when it gets the invoice type, the reason that we can't find them, like out of business, can't find them, or just don't pay. In which case, we should be looking at other options to get them if they're still in business, for instance. You see some of these companies that will file bankruptcy every year, and they'll be in the same place for 7 years with a new name every time, same owners, different name, different corporation, and they just walk away from their debts constantly.
Absolutely true. We are working more closely now with the city attorney and reviewing those cases when they come back. And we do have a litigation project through our office that we're working more closely to refer those kinds of accounts to the city attorney.
If you can find them.
If we can find them, right.
If I could just follow up real quickly there. Item number 15, Imperio de Simon Bolivar Corporation, Bolivia, whatever, $11,000 on that. Now, do we follow that out and make sure we know they're on a list that are such, or even those personal checks? There's one New Century Design for $7,000, and then there's one individual that had one check, and he sent part of it in out of a $6,000, but then the other one he didn't do it all, the $6,000. I'm just curious. I mean, I'm looking at, larger amounts of checks, or maybe the energy is worth it. What do we do about those kinds of things? Just write them off, or and they come back on other issues, like Mr. Smith said, they redesign themselves or whatever? I'm just curious if there's anything we can do. Can we send them to the...
Yeah, and I do want to reassure you that we take a multi-pronged approach to collections of this nature. The normal collection process with our collection agencies or in-house in the Office of Finance, if they're determined to be a appropriate case, we refer them to the city attorney. And if they're, of course, at a significant level, we have our publication of top debtors as well. So it is a multi-pronged approach, but it does come to a point of determining whether or not it's what the cost-benefit analysis is on a particular case.
The bigger question on that is, are they doing business with us in another way right now? That's the part. I don't want to even have them in the room or near the room or anything when they got these kind of marks on their record. Is there some screening process of future things that kind of put a red flag on something like this, or this person or this corporation?
And if I understood you correctly, you said in terms of doing business with the city, yes, we do a review always before we contract with a new vendor to make sure that there's no outstanding liability.
Now, do you deal with the parking lot issues too, about owing us money?
I do. We do.
Well, you heard that outburst the other day about $100,000 worth. Is that true?
I'm not sure what particular outburst you're referring to.
One of my council colleagues talked about $105,000 worth of uncollected money from some of these parking lot vendors.
Mm-hmm.
The top one is like 70 or 80 million.
Yeah.
The top debtor on that list is in excess of $70 million. But I'm not real comfortable going into the details of that right now, but you do know that
I didn't mean 100,000. I meant 100 million. Yeah.
Right. He's been pursued both criminally and civilly. He has been found guilty in criminal court. As to whether or not we can really look forward to any kind of significant compensation, it's questionable. I was told that the presiding judge said that he did not believe in debtor's prison and made that comment in court. So we can pursue it as best we can. I don't know if he's going to say any time, but part of his restitution or part of the decision in court, he had to turn over his records that we are auditing currently.
Yeah, what about his parking lots? Can you turn them over
We could sell them.
as an asset so we could sell them?
We don't have the ability to do that at this time.
I guess say in lieu of, we'll take it from you and we'll sell it.
That would be great if we
Powers
could.
like that?
We don't have the ability to do that, no.
What about the ability to put a receiver at the parking lot and just take the money as it comes in?
That conceptually has actually come up before, and I believe something like that could be implemented. In this particular case, because of some of the requirements or restrictions with the court findings in his case, he's been charged to pay. And again, I don't know how in-depth I should get into this, but I want to try to address your question.
I asked the question. I'm sorry about that. Just curious about your abilities here.
We do not have the ability to actually take the physical property. In terms of actually receiving the debt, that's conceptually a possibility, but I do know that he is still charged with paying what they've determined is appropriate immediate restitution. And once the audit is concluded, they will come up with a more accurate number as to what is owed.
In the meantime, he hides all his assets.
Can we do like a
Yes,
lien on his
but
assets?
they have attempted to do that. He's claiming property. But again,
In years past, I mean, and I think all of us experience, you go in a business, and in years past, it was a marshal or somebody standing there at the cash register collecting the money while they're doing business, which was a clear indication that there was a problem, but that was the resort they took to collect their money. The person stayed in business, and the institution or the government entity collected their daily receipts as a down payment on what they owed. And so is that no longer viable?
my understanding is it is conceptually an option. I don't know what would need to happen at this point because of the court's intervention to allow that to happen. But I can promise you, I definitely will make sure I ask that question tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and the city attorney maybe is in this one, is have you publicly listed, the media heard one of my colleagues say there's $105 million that hasn't been collected, collect that money first, and so on and so forth. Is there a way in which you can put that list up there, who these people are, the amount?
It's on the website.
It's on the website.
It's on his website.
So it's out there.
It is out there, yes.
Okay.
In fact, I think I know we do, we put a link on our email and e-news to direct people to find the 250 debtors.
Absolutely.
You answered the question, but I didn't write down the answer. Why didn't Public Works put a lien? Do we know that?
You would actually have to ask Public Works, I believe.
You got to know that. In this particular case?
Yes.
Because at the time, they didn't have the manpower, they didn't have anybody with that knowledge. So that's why they didn't do it. But since then, they have acquired someone, and they are now putting the liens.
And so when it comes to you, it's beyond the statute, so they can't do it.
That's right.
So while it was in statute, they didn't have the resources.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Now, one quick question, just in general, as we're talking about bigger collections, is there a way to avoid these high amounts of taxes owed by collecting more frequently than we're currently doing on some of these big cases?
We do try to observe and keep an eye on these, as you say, before they get to that point. Now, this particular situation, the parking operators are a little different animal, if you will. And that balance came from several years of him not submitting his parking occupancy tax.
Is there some way to go after them right away when that isn't done?
And that is what we're attempting to do right now. We actually have been in conversation with and working very closely with the LAPD Commission Investigation Division to make sure that these people are in compliance. And I know, in fact, they have an operation that's supposed to begin in March to expand addressing these kinds of issues.
Very good.
Okay. So we'll move that item, number 14.
Thank you.
Item 15 is CO report relative to the status of Nikola construction projects.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Ramon Soto with the CAO's office. In considering the 2009-10 budget, we were asked by this committee to report back on the city's Nikola construction program and its debt service impact on the general fund. So that's the report you have before you. I'll give you some snippets of or highlights from it. Okay. A total of 66 projects have been identified that are subject to the city's Nikola program. The estimated cost of these projects is about $1.5 billion. About $1.32 billion of the debt was authorized through fiscal year 2008-9, and about just a little over $1 billion, or 80%, has been issued, and about $263.9 billion has not yet been issued. The 66 projects consist of 28 completed projects with a Nikola authority of $650.6 million, 29 active projects with a Nikola authority of $720.9 million, 6 authorized but deferred projects with Nikola authority of $78.2 million, and 3 conceptual projects which would require $60.2 million in funding. It's significant to note that $917 million of the $1.5 billion identified in the report is attributable to 6 large projects, which were the Police Administration Building, the Figueroa Plaza purchase, the Public Works Building, the Central Library, the Alt Fuels Program, the City Hall East Fire Life Safety Program. Otherwise, the average cost per project is about $9.8 million. Due to the city's severe budget constraints, we are recommending that Nikola funding for projects not yet in construction be deferred. This would add 7 projects to the 6 previously deferred, for a total of 13 projects. And this action would result in the total deferral of about $165 million in Nikola financing. The new projects that would be deferred would be 4 authorized projects, which are the Street Services Urban Forestry Relocation, and the 109th Street Pool Project, the Costello Pool Project, the Lincoln Pool Project, and then 3 conceptual projects consisting of the Bringing Back Broadway Project, CD10 Neighborhood City Hall, and the LAPD SID Tech Lab Project. And just as an aside on the SID Tech Lab Project, we are doing our best to try to put them into Piper Tech, and if we do it, then we'll be using Prop 2 monies only and not Nikola. We're still investigating that, but we're very hopeful that we can do that.
So how much space do we find at Piper Tech?
We are hiring a consultant, a space planner who's very familiar with the Tech Lab's operations to do a review of that. We're doing a walkthrough this Wednesday. So we're very hopeful about that.
We appreciate that because not only not having to buy a building, we can also quickly, if we can make that move, stop paying $1 million to keep Parker Center open. So all that.
Yes. Time is of the essence, and we're doing our best to do everything quickly on that. So to go on, regarding debt service costs, the concept debt service costs are a significant component of capital expenditures and are a function of several factors, including Nikola reserve fund requirements, interest rates at the time monies are borrowed, repayment periods, as well as subsequent refinancings. So it's not possible to determine the actual cost of the $1.5 billion, but an approximate amount could be estimated by applying an assumed interest rate of 5% to be repaid over a 30-year period. And this model would result in debt service costs of about 95%, or $1.43 billion. This would mean that total city payments, principal plus interest over 30 years, would be $2.92 billion if we start with the $1.5 billion as the principal. Regarding the city's debt ratio, the city's current non-voter approved direct debt ratio is at 4.93 of general fund revenues. The city's current debt management policy allows for a maximum of 6%. Given declining revenues and limited financial resources, it's important that the city maintain a 1% cushion on our debt capacity so that the city has the ability to issue future debt for fiscal emergencies. Therefore, we are recommending that the city temporarily impose a cap of 5% on its non-voter approved debt service. This action would freeze Nikola financing for any municipal project not in construction, and this would leave the city little room to issue Nikola debt for capital projects and equipment. And the next comment is regarding Nikola equipment. We believe that the issuance of Nikola debt should generally be reserved for the acquisition and improvement of real property and not for equipment. This is because investors in municipal debt do not consider equipment to be a strong credit compared to acquiring and improving real property, and this leads to higher interest rates. And in recent years, the city has been increasing its reliance on Nikola to pay for equipment. And to illustrate, in 2003-04, the city authorized $62.3 million in debt for equipment acquisition, and by 2008-09, it had grown to $128 million. And that's equivalent to 75% of the debt authorized for that year. We're recommending that we report back on a phase out of the use of Nikola for the acquisition of capital equipment. So that would conclude my presentation to you. We have staff from our debt service group as well as other city staff here for any questions you might have.
Okay. Let me just start off with some questions. One of the things in looking at your list of active projects completed, but Figueroa Plaza and Public Works Building, in all likelihood in the future, any movement in those two buildings will be city employees moving from other sites. Is that true?
That's the plan. There's a long-term restacking plan, which would ultimately complete around 2020, if I'm not mistaken. We have it's largely occupied by city staff as we speak. However, there are a number of occupancies that are on long-term leases. However, as those leases complete, the intention is to ultimately fill that building with city staff.
Okay, keeping those two on the active list, generally if we're going to be going forward on bringing other city employees into those buildings, the only cost would be tenant improvements primarily.
That's correct.
All right, should we put both of them on deferred? Because shouldn't we be limiting or almost eliminating tenant improvement costs merely to move city employees from one building to the other?
Depending on how the building itself is laid out, that's where city staff is going to move in, that may necessitate the expenditure of funds to do TIs. We have, city space standards. A former occupant may have used the space in a very distinct manner.
But
And so,
I can understand that if it's special funds and we have money to reach into, but if we don't have special funds, I don't know whether we want to use a credit card to do tenant improvements, because somebody...
I agree with you, and the issue would be do we use either cash or is the tenant that's moving in subject to special funds?
Well, the thing is, I think special funds pretty well answers itself, but the issue, and we would use them, but what I'm saying, we at times are very, very good in the sense of recreating building space to people's, not their needs often, but what their wishes are. And sometimes we expend money on these transfers that you could easily not have to reconfigure. People would have to just kind of adjust around what's existing. And so every time we make a move, if it means we're going to totally reconfigure the property for city services, it's a lot of money when we think about the square footage we might be moving people into. So I'm just...
The other issue is it is a Class A building. So we're trying to maintain it as a Class A building, and there's a reason for that, because eventually you're going to want to make a decision on whether or not you want to keep Figueroa Plaza or you want to do something else.
Until it goes down at least three times.
No. Not now. I'm just saying that when we bought the building, there was the...
I mean, because we bought it, we only bought it when it went up 3 times, right?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
So in order to... Yes, we do recommend it. We won't go there. But I think that one of the issues with Figueroa Plaza has been that it's a beautiful Class A building, and we're trying to maintain it as a Class A building. So any investment that we make, whether we put departments there or not, it was our view that we would maintain it, because if we don't, then the value won't stay where it is or go up.
Do we have the same...
I'm not making fun of this, but I think it's important that we...
Oh, no, I understand that we
keep doing it. And in that building, the market would definitely... It's a good project to invest in, our opinion, from a financing point of view.
We have the same issues on Public Works building, Class A?
I don't know.
Class B.
I don't
Yeah,
think
it's
it's
not a
Class A.
Okay.
But that is being paid for by, the special funds. I mean, MICLA
No, but I'm
pays
saying-
for it, but it's reimbursed.
Yeah, special funds, I don't think there's an issue of using that money, but I think we have to be very, very cautious about moving people and then creating a general fund palace for them on a credit card. I mean, I think the issue is sometimes we configure it in a fashion that costs money when we don't go in and say, how can you use it as it's currently configured? And that's where we're going to get the most activity because, as we talk about removing people off the payroll, we're going to shrink our need for space. And in shrinking our need for space, they may be people that are in lease space today that may get moved to FIG as some of these contracts evaporate. But again, we don't want to go in debt reconfiguring a floor because they moved to FIG Plaza. And particularly if it's not special funds. So I'm just wondering, how do we create some language in here that as we make those moves that are eventually going to occur, if it's general fund or MICLA funds, that those have to be dealt with, I think, very seriously as to whether we have to spend any money in those regards. We don't want to drop the level of the building, but again, our tendency is a move is very expensive. And that's just our normal history.
There's $1.4 million that's on the list for tenant improvements to FIG Plaza. For the most part, we've been moving departments into that building by canceling leases. And so that might be the type of language that you're looking for. For the public
But
works,
when we cancel them, then we don't want to compound it by, tenant improvements beyond what we
Right.
gain by the cancellation of the lease.
this funding has also been approved as a recovery bond, MICLA, which has to be spent within 3 years from the end of this year, so by 2013. For the Public Works building, it's $1 million. The project is actually $2 million, and the other half of the project would be paid for by special funds. And it's to move departments into the space that the police department vacated when they moved into the new police administration building.
So again, when they make that move, now they're coming from where? From another building?
They came from right, they're coming from several buildings,
Okay, so they're
including
coming from
City
several
Hall.
buildings, and we would hope that they could use the space that the police department vacated without completely revamping it and costing a ton of money.
Councilman John Chavez with the CAO's office. Yes, the general services typically will look and assess the current digs and try to determine and try to save money where possible and just use the existing furniture. On the fifth floor of the Public Works building where the police department left, generally considered to be substandard, so there'd be some tenant improvements there if they were going to fit in other city employees. But typically, we're at Big Plaza, for instance, if we're going to be putting city employees there, it typically will try to keep the same configuration and save money that way.
I just ask that we consider that on tenant improvements for non-special funds, that we are very, very cautious as to how we spend money on tenant improvements by merely moving city employees from one facility to the other. The other thing I was wondering, and I don't know, we run out of ideas, but is there any other options on funding some of these deferred or active projects other than NICOLA? Is there any other means of creating revenue for those?
I think the group's been trying to identify funds where available, but so far I don't think we've been able to come with anything.
One of the deferred projects, which is the Rainforest of the Americas, which is the zoo construction program, based on the very competitive construction climate that we're in right now, we think we're going to be able to complete that project without using MICLA. So we would be...
That's at the zoo?
At the zoo, the Rainforest of the Americas. We would be deferring the MICLA funding for the project, but not necessarily the project. It has its GO bond monies. For the swimming pools, unfortunately, they're ineligible for a lot of the, for all of the ERA grants that the city has gotten, and they are also ineligible for the Proposition 84 state grant money that just became available because they're existing opportunities. I'm sure that Rec and Parks will continue to look for grants, but it's very challenging.
Just when we talk about putting the cap at 5%, how much cash does that then leave available?
1.07.
1.07?
No, 0.07.
0.07?
Yeah, percentage, because it takes you.
I'm sorry?
We're
No, that's a
4.93
percent.
We're
currently.
at 4.93. Our
Yeah.
cap is 6%.
Yeah, what does that turn into dollars?
I think we said 300 million? Mario is our...
Mario Vasquez with the City Administrative Officer. At 5%, you would have $260 million available to borrow. So at 4.93%, it would be somewhere close, higher than 260 million, 270, somewhere around there.
You mean just from going from 4.9 to 5?
Well, we are currently at 4.93, and the example I gave, and it's in the chart, which obviously we don't have in front of us, but at 5%, you can borrow up to 260 million to get to 6%. So since we are at 4.93, logically, you can borrow a little bit more than $260 million.
Okay, that gets us to 6.
Correct.
But what gets us to 5?
It would be
4.93.
Well, it's 25 for every 0.1.
Yeah, 10% of 260 is 26 million, and this would be less than that, so it's,
10 million? About 10 million. Back of the envelope here, it's about 10 million.
No, it's fine. That's fine, yeah. I'm just trying to put it in context of how
Right.
much so we're down to $10 million left in our...
I mean, one of the things that we always try to do is refunding, right? So it's not that we're not going to issue another MICLA sometime in March or April, May because of the ARA funding, but we'll refund out commercial paper. I mean, we will do everything we can to lower that amount, but we do have to, continue to try to refund and get that down. Now, what brought the chart down, up to 4.93 this time around was the reduction in revenue. It had been at 4.72, but because there was a reduction in revenue of almost, $185 million, it brought the chart up to 4.93. So it's between how much you issue and what your revenues are. It's a combination of both.
Okay. And MICLA is essentially, as we've all said, a credit card purchase. If we don't purchase equipment and rather go to a lease-based system, would that be, in the eyes of the bond council, the same thing?
Yes.
So it's just a debt service instrument, we'll call it what you want.
Correct. We used Motorola's debt financing for, I believe, the radios?
Radios.
Or in-car video, the
radios.
The radios. That counts in our debt, it's in our debt chart.
Yeah.
It's considered capital lease. Yeah, we try to get around that, but.
No good.
Let me just ask you that figure again. Mr. Smith asked you from 5.0 to 6 is how much money?
From 5% to 6% would be 260 million. Again, that was based on, we made some assumptions as the interest rate. And until we actually go to the market to borrow the money, we wouldn't know the interest rate. But
And so the proposal of CAO is basically creating a similar issue like our reserve fund. We have a reserve fund of 5% for ongoing expenditures, but we have a 1% for emergencies.
That's correct.
So that moves us from between 5 and 6 is only for emergencies, and the ongoing expenditures are 1 to 5.
Correct.
And then on this list, we listed the SID project as conceptual. Isn't that active? It's not conceptual?
No, it's the council has not yet approved it. Officially, it's pending before a committee. I believe it's this committee, if I'm not mistaken. But at the direction of the committee, we're looking aggressively towards citing them at Piper Tech, and if successful, then we would be able to use Prop 2 general obligation bond funds instead of MICLA.
Let me, one thing, I agree with your recommendations. I'm going to stumble through number 3 and make it a little more specific. But what I'd like to do on number 3 recommendation is have 3A, that we instruct the CAO to reduce the amount of MICLA used for equipment and use MICLA financing for the acquisition and improvements of real property, and explore other options for paying for equipment. And then on B, that we have the first sentence as listed in 3, but we add a second sentence that says, this phase out report should include recommendations to pay for ongoing new and replacement equipment on a pay-as-you-go basis. So that'd be the second sentence in.
I do want to make one comment about equipment. We're talking about cars and things like that, but there are some capital equipment items that are appropriate for long-term leases, and those are the things that are more that stay with us for 20 years. I call them the Tonka toys and the fire and the helicopters, and the things that are really large equipment items. So, what we're concerned about is that, one year we bought, those electric little lawnmowers for the golf cart. It's, got to that point. So I think that one of the things that we need to be careful about is not to box ourselves in too much, but also to recognize that there is capital equipment that we keep for 20 years.
No,
And the market doesn't mind those. It's that we've degraded Nikola equipment to the 5, 6, 7 year mark, which is...
No, I don't think we disagree with that. I think the
Okay.
issue that we're heading towards, you should probably have it when you pay for it.
Absolutely.
And if you bought it again before you paid for the first one,
Agreed.
you may not have needed to put it in Nikola.
We agree.
So that's what we're trying to get to. There's no disagreement that there's some long-term equipment needs,
Right.
but not stuff that lasts 6 years and has a perishable life and all that other good stuff.
We agree.
Have
That'd be
a,
great.
That matches what we thought.
That matches what we thought, but I just wanted to clarify that.
You're right.
I have an attachment 1 issue on page 1 of the attachment, because these folks are in a little pocket in my district, and they always bring it up to me. It's the Bureau of Street Services for Thatcher Yard. And as you can see there, the scope of this project involved the retrofit of the Bureau's 41,141 square foot Thatcher Yard. The cost of the project is $6.7 million to be totally financed by Nikola. Of this amount, $4.4 million has been previously authorized. That is where my question begins. And BOE has completed construction drawings for this project. The project was placed on deferred status, additional funds, so it's on the deferred project list. The $6.7 million totally financed and $4.4 million has been previously authorized, wasn't spent. Could you give me a verbal report? It's a little pocket called, the triangle there.
Was the question, was it spent?
Yeah, where are we at with this?
They're currently doing an environmental impact report and also going through the California Coastal Commission permit process. But beyond that, there's no money that has been spent on this project in terms of construction.
So the $4.4 million was authorized, but a very small piece was used.
That's correct. And I should add that the Bureau of Sanitation, because half of the properties owned by the Bureau of Sanitation is kicking in their fair share of the EIR costs.
So do you have any sense of what will happen next under these circumstances we're in now, Mr. Phil?
It would just stop, it would go on hold until such time as the city's funding situation becomes better, or if somehow special funds became available to complete it.
Okay, that I'll share that with them. That's news for them.
Okay. And then, just for the body of the report, we just want to make sure that we highlight the request that the CAO, the General Services, and the concerned departments, and this is on non-special funds tenant improvements, that we are particularly sensitive on tenant improvements that affect Nikola and the general fund, and that we also ask the CAO to continue looking for if there are other sources of revenue for either the deferred projects or the active projects other than Nikola. So we can move that item with those recommended changes. So we have item 16?
16.
Okay.
So,
This is a reconsideration.
okay, this is a CO report relative to proposed debt financing of judgments and stipulated judgments. Mario Vasquez is here.
Mario Vasquez with the City Administrative Officer. The CEO does recommend the adoption of 2 documents related to the proposed debt financing of several recently paid and yet to be paid judgments and stipulated judgments resulting from settlements. Adoption of the 2 documents will allow the city to seek court validation of a future judgment obligation bond issuance in an amount not to exceed $65 million. And as the CEO report indicates, the general fund was recently used to pay approximately $23 million in judgments In addition, there are several other judgments totaling up to $31 million that will be eligible for payment if approved by the City Council. And if the proposed bond issuance that's before you today is approved by the courts, the resulting bond proceeds will be used to reimburse the general fund for the $23 million and to pay any unpaid judgments. And as such, our office does request your approval today to initiate the court validation process.
So our vote today moves it to council that we're supporting the court validation process, and to give us a timeline of when this has to be completed so that all of this judgment obligation bond can move forward. What's the timing?
Well, the timing is to borrow the monies by June 30th to replenish the general fund. With approval today and with council approval next week, the city attorney would go to court in early March to initiate the court validation process.
Okay. Do we have a placeholder for, now when do we need that in council?
It could go a week from today or tomorrow.
In addition, Natalie Brill, Sales Office, we have asked the city attorney to come to you with any remaining settlements and judgments by what day?
At the end of February 26th.
Okay.
So that would be the last day that the city attorney should turn something into you, so then we can go to court on March 1st. Because I know they're in the works with some settlements, and we've given them to the 20, whatever he's 26.
The 26.
Could you double check the time? Because it seems like when they discussed this during the settlement issue, the timeline was much tighter.
Well, because they have to go back and they actually have to get the piece of paper.
Yeah.
I think Mario can explain it better than I can.
Correct. Where there's two situations, a judgment where the courts have entered a judgment against the city, and a judgment or a stipulated judgment resulting from settlements, and that's where the city attorney is trying to settle with the plaintiff. And in those situations, they do have to go to court to get approval for that stipulated judgment.
No, I understand that, but it seemed like when they were in the last week, they were talking about the timeline of going to court for validation, and the timeline of when cases could be added was much tighter than what we're saying today. So just verify.
Okay.
Yes, we can have the city attorney report to your office.
Okay. And it seemed like when we were talking about it in council, they did not seem like next week was okay. It seemed like they were saying last week it should be this week.
And we'll continue to work with them when the item comes to
Correct.
council. I
That's
asked,
why I asked for a placeholder. Because
No,
it gave a
we
clear
agree.
impression.
We agree, and, the problem is that they're probably in a tight time schedule, because they have to go back to the court once you approve it and get that piece of paper. For them, it is a tighter timeframe.
Yeah. So if we can make sure if it's this week, so we won't miss any time, or if we're comfortable with next week, but we need to make sure,
Okay, we'll
because
check.
we don't have an ability to miss a date.
No.
that's correct, and thank you for actually hearing the item, because this is very, very critical component for us to balance this year. Right now, there's roughly about $32 million that's been authorized as far as borrowing from the reserve fund. And we know, if we look at our reserve fund balance and our shortfalls for this year, to get to our 232 that we discussed last week, it assumes we're going to get $32 million at a minimum that will be repaid to the reserve fund. If that does not happen, we pretty much end the year with a zero reserve fund balance based on the current path that we are on. And this is, you're doing the JOB is not a slam dunk. Last time we went out with the 20 million, we ran into a little bit of difficulty at the market. We had to bump up the rates a little bit in order to sell them. With our continued deterioration in our credit rating, this will not be an easy sale. So I wanted to make sure the committee understands how important this
Well, no,
component
it's very
is.
important, and that's why the young lady that's from the city attorney's office that is managing this, I thought she made it very clear that this current week was very important for us to move the paperwork.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
And for Natalie, Mr. Alarcon brought up a good question it was an executive session on a lawsuit. And that is why, if the bond agencies frown upon judgment obligation bonds, why would we go that route and not do a general obligation bond, government GO bond type thing? Can you not do that on a GO bond?
You can't.
Cannot. This is the only mechanism available.
Yes, this is, and one of the reasons you would, because it's validated by the court, it doesn't make sense to do the Nikola. It makes sense to use the structure that the court gives you. And that's why we use the judgment obligation bonds. And you're right, it's not the best way of doing it, but I think there's an understanding that we need the cash.
All right, we'll move that item with those suggestions. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. I think we have item 17.
No, that's on consent.
We did it.
That was on consent?
We know you're technically.
Yeah, we dealt with that.
Oh, you slipped that one in on me.
Better not.
Just make some people in the community happy. We're moving before we're ready to switch there.
Look at that report.